nice to meet you again. Following a really busy week, it's great to be back doing the Sportsline Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on the CHCH and Parrot Media platform. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Well, things were really quiet on the couch here, and it had a lot to do with the extended coverage of a particular team that captured the attention of the entire nation. Now, whether you lived in Dawson Creek, BC, Battleford, Saskatchewan, Murray Harbor, Prince Edward Island, or right here in the Hammer, for 28 days you rode the emotional roller coaster ride of the Blue Jays, who won their postseason series in the American League Divisional and Championship Series. But, with the Jays' insight of their first World Series since 1993, the final two games against the Los Angeles Dodgers were just shocking and eventually heartbreaking. To talk about one of the wildest rides in Southern Ontario sports, let's say hello to the host of the Fan Morning Show at the Sportsnet 590 radio station, The Fan, Ben Ennis. Great to hook up with you, partner.
Thanks for having me, Bubba.
Full disclosure, we're a couple of Oakville guys from way back in the day, and a lot of people would know that we were fellow colleagues at Sportsnet. Those days, were so amazing at Sportsnet in its early days, were they not?
Oh my God, we go way back, Bubba, and back when Sportsnet used to be in Scarborough, and back when they used to use actual physical tapes. Remember those, the big beta tapes? I mean, we're old, man. Yeah, it is crazy how long we've been in this industry. Can you imagine that we would ever see? Well, Rogers Center looked like it did. Oh my God, you got pictures of me. Oh my goodness. I had no idea you were going to break out the old pics. But yeah, who'd ever thought that Rogers Center would look the way it did with all the renovations, and that the Blue Jays would once again be in the World Series for the first time since 1993 like they were this year?
Just before we get to that amazing ride, I want to talk a little bit about your ride, because obviously I knew you as Sportsnet guy, and then I left to come to CHCH. And I believe just as I was leaving, you kind of got a job with, I believe it was a Sportsnet property, being Fox, doing soccer. And then you ended up in radio. How did you end up at the Fan 590?
I actually was always in radio. I was doing TV, and I was doing production work in TV while still working in radio. I actually just celebrated my 20-year anniversary, if you can believe it.
Congratulations.
This past summer. Thank you very much. Yeah, in July, where I started my first internship was in radio. Done everything from production to hosting to sports updates. I never said no, as you know, Bubba. That's the way it went, right? You do whatever comes across your plate. And when I was working at Sportsnet, I was doing sports updates on the radio. I was hosting different weekend radio shows, working 7 days a week in TV and radio, and eventually found myself waking up at 4 a.m. to do 5-day a week sports talk radio.
Yeah, the kids of today, they just don't understand the grind, right? They just don't get it. Hey, no. let's get into the Blue Jays. But before we really talk about them, I want you to listen to the words of one of your favorite friends, one of your good friends, one of your colleagues from July the 2nd. Have a listen.
Oh, my goodness.
It just feels like a very open American League, and with a Blue Jays team that's had this kind of depth, this kind of self-belief, this amount of just unsung heroes, that they're relevant. And I think they're going to be buyers at the deadline and only add to that talent base. So yeah, I'm in. I believe what is happening here is real. Do they win a World Series? Probably not. Are they going to be a playoff team and maybe finally get a playoff victory? Yeah, I think so.
JD Bunkus on the Sportsline Podcast as, again, July the 2nd. Can you believe everything he said came true?
Yeah. I wish he had said, they're actually going to score the World Series winning run from third base in the bottom of the 9th inning of Game 7, and that had come true. But yeah, unbelievably, the Blue Jays, after an 88-loss season, did all those things. They won 94 games. They won a division title. They beat the favored Yankees in a division series. They beat the Mariners in 7 games in one of the most exciting finishes in Blue Jays history in a 7-game American League Championship Series. And were, I mean, as close as you can get to a World Series title. But yeah, no, I think JD Bunkus would be more than pleased to hear you say that he was correct, because he loves to be correct. I mean, who doesn't, but him more than others. And he's not always correct. I must add an addendum, but yeah, he loves to hear when he's correct.
I'll tell you, he really was. He nailed it right there. And he has heard that clip, so he's pretty proud of himself on that one, though. But look, hey, how do you feel now? I mean, we're a couple of days outside of Game 7, and it has been a long time. You know, because I think in the National Hockey League, everyone's got their regional team. The NFL, everyone's got their team. I think the NBA, I don't think it's passionate enough across the entire country, except for when we win. But everyone hopped on board with the Blue Jays. Everyone felt the wins, and everyone sunk during the Game 7 loss. Have you gotten over it yet?
Oh, I know my kids haven't really. My wife did this thing, which I don't know if it's good or bad. Like she did capture some of the moments. Like I have pictures of my kids weeping in the bottom of the 9th when Jeff Hoffman gives up the game tying home run to Miguel Rojas. There's also a video. Unfortunately, I wasn't with my kids. I was at the ballpark during Game 7. I haven't had the heart to look at the videos. There are videos that live in my phone, and I haven't had enough separation from Saturday to look at them yet. But, man, this is part of being a sports fan and giving your heart over to sports. Is what I told my kids, too. So the wins aren't as sweet if the losses aren't as devastating. And, boy, there's just no question Saturday was devastating. But you're right to talk about how this nation really does live and die with this Blue Jays team. And it's so different than the other sports. I think in 2019, people from all over Canada did glom on to the Raptors, and eventually they did become Canada's team. But there's a longer history with this Blue Jays team, right? Since 1977, they've existed. They weren't always Canada's only baseball team, but since the Expos have left, it's been, if you're a baseball fan in this country, there is one team that you can support, and you see it every time during the regular season. The Blue Jays go out to Seattle, or they go to Minnesota, or they go to one of these American cities that is a border city, is close enough for Canadians to cross the border and support their team. They are well supported throughout this country. And a lot of people of my vintage, of which you were a similar one, Bubba, remember what it's like to see this team win back-to-back World Series in 92 and 93. And there's a bit of nostalgia watching Rogers Center fill up like it did over these postseason games.
I think that is exactly an amazing point that I've been expressing to people, that I've seen it. I understand it. I can see the city go wild. I mean, the parties and the celebrations and packing Yonge Street after the wins in 92 and 93 are still lodged in my brain. But what went down just a couple of weeks ago for 28 days was to a whole new generation. And we got to enjoy that again as well. And that's what I think made it so wonderful to see a whole new brand of Blue Jay fans fall in love with baseball, not just a team, but fall in love with baseball. I'll ask you this, and I know this may be difficult, or maybe it's easy for you. There are so many memories. Let's take away the disappointments. So many memories that were made over those 28 days. When you think back 5 years from now, what will be the first that comes out of your mouth?
If we're going to just do positive, and you're right, we should think about the positive, despite it being difficult not to think about the winning run in the World Series being 90 feet and less than 90 feet away from home plate. But I think unquestionably, George Springer's home run in Game 7 of the American League Championship Series, that was historic in its own right, and it was not in a World Series. And Joe Carter's historic home run walked off the 1993 World Series against the Philadelphia Phillies, and that forever will be the biggest home run in the history of this franchise. But I think you can rightly, and I think it's the correct take, to argue that George Springer's home run down multiple runs in a Game 7 to get to the World Series in the 7th inning was the second biggest home run in the history of this franchise. It's actually the first time in baseball history there's been a multiple run deficit overcome by one swing of the bat in the 7th inning or later. The Blue Jays don't get to go on this wild ride and, yes, experience the heartbreak of Game 7. Without that, their season had ended 2 weeks prior to being in the World Series if George Springer doesn't get them off the mat and hit that historic home run. For me, and there's a lot to choose from, whether it's the Vladdy home run in his first at bat of the Yankee series or the Addison Barger grand slam in Game 1 of the World Series. But for me, none of it, we don't get this extra 2 weeks of baseball without the George Springer 7th inning 3-run homer in Game 7 against the Mariners.
Yeah, I dropped to my knees at that moment. It was just unbelievable. You just couldn't believe what you saw. But I'll tell you what comes a real close second for me, Ben, was the back-to-back home runs at Dodger Stadium from Schneider and of course, Schneider on one end, someone you're not expecting it from, and then 2 pitches later, Vladdy going deep. And you're like, oh my goodness, that was the one moment where I go, we're going to win the World Series. I really did feel that then.
Oh my goodness. And then the video taken from Davis Schneider's dad's like meta glasses.
Yes.
Going viral. I mean, and I think a lot of people had questions as to whether Davis Schneider should have been leading off that game with George Springer out of the lineup, dealing with his multiple ailments. And what does he do? Immediately shut everybody up by hammering the first pitch of the game over Blake Snell's head. And then 2 pitches after that, it's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Making it 2-0 immediately. And it's so easy to forget, considering how close the Blue Jays were and how evenly matched these two teams seemed. But they started this World Series as the Dodgers, like the overwhelming favorite, right?
Yes.
Like,
yep.
about the same betting favorite as the Warriors were over the Raptors in 2019. And of course, the Raptors did win that NBA Finals. But yeah, that was the moment where you thought, oh my God, yeah, they're not just going to go into Dodger Stadium and this is going to be a quick series. Of course, the World Series last year ended in 5 games, and it was the Yankees that couldn't extend it to 6. But no, the Blue Jays put themselves in a position to win just one of the 2 final home games and couldn't do it. But they're not in that position if not for those 2 home runs to lead off that game.
So obviously there's an ending, and as manager Schneider kind of put it, a new standard has been set. And obviously to get back is very, very difficult. To win back-to-back is very difficult. So credit to the Dodgers for that. But to get back, it may be even more difficult for the Blue Jays. And all starts with free agency. Good news today, Shane Bieber signing that $16 million opt-in. And as we look at our free agent board, there's certainly some work to do. But Bieber, great news there.
Yeah, and I think that maybe signals something really significant and interesting, because Shane Bieber, there were projections that Shane Bieber, had he opted out of that contract and reached free agency, could have been looking at somewhere in the realm of $150 million over 5 years. Those were the projections as far as his earning potential. And there's great uncertainty in Major League Baseball beyond next season with a potential labor stoppage as well. And a guy who's coming off Tommy John surgery, you would think would want the security of a long-term big money deal. But him opting into a 1-year, $16 million deal, which is only slightly more than Max Scherzer made at 41 years old this past season, it must indicate that he, 1, believes that the Blue Jays are capable of getting back, or 2, he thinks that there are going to be more additions made to this team, maybe even a contract agreed to by Bo Bichette. And 3, that he just wants to see this thing to its conclusion for at least 1 more year. I think it's a massive deal for this Blue Jays team to start the offseason with that piece of good news. And, Blue Jays fans needed a piece of good news considering how fresh the wounds are still from Saturday.
You're no doubt about that. And I think everything I read about what happens with Tommy John surgery, because I look at Bieber and his work as a whole, his starts in the regular season and what he did in the postseason, and it kind of ranged from okay to good to very good. I don't think I really saw a lot of bad, but I believe that he has that off season and then a full spring training, that his arm's going to be a better arm start the spring. Do you believe that to be true?
Oh yeah. That seems pretty clear. Remember, when the Blue Jays acquired him at the trade deadline, he was not yet pitching in the major leagues. Like, he was still rehabbing from that Tommy John surgery, and they had to send him back down to Buffalo, and then eventually called him up, and he performed super well. But you're right, there was wild vacillations in performance. He was never bad, but this is a guy who's been the best pitcher in the American League before, having been a former Cy Young Award winner. I think we did see flashes of that, but the further you get away from a major elbow surgery like Tommy John, and this is a guy who is a very much a control pitcher. He needs to throw strikes. He needs to throw his breaking ball where he wants to do it. And the further you get away from Tommy John surgery, the last thing to come back, the velocity is the first thing. The last thing to come back is the command. So you would think a whole off season and getting a 30 start regular season under his belt. Could we see the best version or return to the best version of Shane Bieber next season? I think it's a very realistic possibility. He's only 30 years old as well. He should be in the middle of his prime.
Had 7 names on that free agent board, and I think the biggest one of them all, it's like in bold, and that's Bo Bichette. Boy, it was great to see him perform in the World Series. It was great to see him in his very first at bat poke a single. Like, I mean, let's be honest, the guy missed 20 games in the regular season and still finished second in hits. And I believe he was second in extra base hits as well, too. How important to you? I mean, because money's going to talk. Let's be honest. This is a business. Do you see Bo Bichette wearing baby blue in 2026?
You know, if you had asked me at the beginning of this season, I would have had a very different answer. And of course, a lot has happened since late March of 2025 to here we are in November. But it did feel like the writing was on the wall, that it was, sure, it would have been great for it to be the Vlad and Bo era, but Vladdy got his deal and Bo didn't get his. And, you know, the circumstances of the down year and the injury last season, it just didn't feel like things were aligning for him to continue his Blue Jays career beyond this season. And then they have the season, and he returns to the best version of himself, and he leads the team in RBIs, and he has big hit after big hit after big hit, and en route to a 94-win season and a Game 7 of the World Series appearance. And after missing all those games, comes back for the World Series, and on one leg looks like himself again. And he said what just about everybody else has said, including Shane Bieber, who has now put his money where his mouth is, that he wants to be a Blue Jay and that he's never wavered from that position. And also, now that we've seen him at second base, I think pretty clearly the Blue Jays like what they saw defensively out of Andres Gimenez at shortstop. If he is open to changing positions, playing second base, I could very easily see a return for Bo Bichette. And wouldn't that feel like destiny for Vlad and Bo to play the rest of their primes at the very least together after being so close to reaching the mountaintop of baseball, to give it a kick of the can yet again and into their 30s to see if they could one day bring a World Series championship to Toronto?
Look, I know you're not an agent, but like, what do you think it's going to cost? What length, or I mean, do you think maybe he'd go for something short just to test out the waters? What do you think that it will take the Blue Jays organization to keep him at least for a couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, it's his free agency was always going to be the most mysterious black box of this offseason. Well, one, because of the uncertainty last year, we didn't know if he would bounce back. So he did. He bounced back incredibly well. He was the best version of himself offensively, but that leaves a lot to be desired defensively, especially if he wants to play shortstop next season. I don't see him as a shortstop. He can play shortstop for your team if you have a position open and you just accept that he is going to be a below average defender at that position. But I think if you're trying to maximize what Bo Bichette is and what he can be, he's not playing shortstop. So it takes him kind of out of this Corey Seager mold and puts him into this Marcus Semien mold, who Blue Jays fans well know. He changed positions when the Blue Jays signed him to a one-year deal and then went out in free agency and did sign with Corey Seager's club in Texas for less than $200 million. I think considering the offense you get from Bo Bichette, I think you should reasonably expect him to make somewhere around $30 million a season. And because he's very young too, right? He's not as young as Vladdy at 26, but he's right there, I believe at 27. I think you're looking at a $250 to $300 million deal for Bo Bichette. Of course, it all depends on who the bidders are, right? And that's a really complicating factor here, because you know who needs infielders? The Yankees and the Dodgers. And I mean, that's a nightmare scenario. Either one of them you just lost to in 7 games of the World Series, and the other one's your divisional rival. But those guys also have something in common, that they got lots of money to spend. And despite the fact that the Dodgers had, with their luxury tax payments, like a $500 million payroll this past season, it seems like there is no limit with them. So it would be very classic Dodgers behavior for them to up the ante on Bo Bichette this offseason.
One of the wonderful things about the Blue Jays postseason run, in fact, we saw it all season long, is that they were just different people, and people that we'd never heard of before, or people we maybe didn't expect a lot out of, that all contributed, and it seemed like to be almost on a different night. Yet there was one consistent constant, and that was Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who I thought... I don't know if I'm being dramatic here. It's like we saw him grow up all in 1 year. Do you agree?
Oh, 100%. It was, there were questions not just about his postseason performance, but about what caliber player he was. Not that was he a good player. I think it was well established that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was a good player, and had the potential to be a great player, showed flashes of being a great player. In 2021, finished second in American League MVP voting, of course, to Shohei Ohtani, who was still playing for the Angels back then. But outside of that season, it had been slightly underwhelming, frankly, for a guy that arrived at the major leagues with so much hope and so much promise. And in the postseason, it had been worse than that. The number of games was limited, but 3 for 22, I think he was in the playoffs coming into this postseason. And then to do what he did every single series that the Blue Jays played, and win an American League Championship Series MVP, and then finish his World Series too in the 11th inning with a double off Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who nobody hits, but he did. He led off the bottom of the 11th with a double to try and extend the Blue Jays season. And unfortunately, he was also left stranded after Alejandro Kirk hit into a double play to end the game in the series and the season. It is incredible to think about what kind of a launching pad that could be for him, because he's now silenced so many doubters, of which there were a few, myself included. I didn't know. Hey, you had to give him $500 million because what kind of a franchise are you running if you can't retain the Canadian, the guy that's from the word go said he wants to be with your organization, and he had you up against the wall. But was he worth $500 million? I wasn't sure until this postseason. And I don't know if you could put a price on how good he was in those 3 postseason series.
I just love the fact that, you hear with the New York Yankees, even long after retirement, a guy like Alex Rodriguez, one of the greatest infielders we've ever seen, and he looks over at Derek Jeter and calls him captain. Captain. Like, I thought it was great. And I see Vladdy as that guy right now, the leader, and it's all so wonderful. Speaking of leadership, I don't know how you felt, but there are times I called John Schneider a puppet. And of course, that everything's done in an organizational sort of fashion with the Blue Jays. And I know that's Major League Baseball compared to the old managers, and that the fact they made all the decisions. But did a whole level of respect for John Schneider come for you like it did for me?
Absolutely. And there is the difference just this postseason to previous postseasons where, like you said, it felt like there was an edict or an organizational philosophy that, yeah, in theory he could have gone away from, but really when you've been given that job and you're not an established manager, you're following the orders from the people above you, and his seeming ability to go away from that, but also to adapt within a series. We saw this in Game 5 of the American League Championship Series against the Mariners, where it was Brendan Little on the mound in the biggest moment of that baseball game, and not the Blue Jays' best relievers trying to nurse a victory home and have a 3-2 series lead headed back to Toronto. Because remember, not only did the Blue Jays win Game 7, they had to win Game 6 to get to Game 7 after an opportunity to take a 3-2 series lead in Seattle. But what does he do? In the next opportunity, faced with the exact same situation, he goes to Jeff Hoffman for 6 outs before going back to Hoffman for 3 more outs in the 7th game of the American League Championship Series. He was incredible at adapting and learning how his baseball team was performing on the fly. It is incredible, the growth that he has shown as manager, not just in season, and the clear connection that these players have to him, but the just from the strategy side, how I saw him evolve throughout the postseason.
You know, the whole team just became so incredibly likable. And I think it's going to be real fun following this team for as long as a baseball season is. But it's going to be amazing to me, the anticipation that we're going to have for spring training. Are you not already looking forward to what's going to happen already?
Oh, my God. It does remind me. So I remember there was a generation of baseball fans that were kind of reinvigorated by the 2015 Blue Jays, right? And it was 20 plus years between playoff berths. And I thought there was this fervent fan base for this baseball team, but I wasn't sure. It had to show itself to me, and it did at the end of the regular season in 2015 and into the postseason. And unfortunately for that team, they didn't even make it to a Game 7 of the American League Championship Series against the Royals, but there was incredible moments along the way. And I remember spring training in 2016, the exact thing you're talking about, Bubba. The anticipation for the season was palpable, and the building was jammed all season long. And eventually that 2016 team did make it all the way back to the American League Championship Series and fell even a game short of the 2015 team. But I think you're onto something 100%, that this offseason and baseball's offseason lasts forever. It's not like hockey where all the business gets done in a day and a half and everybody stops thinking about the sport for the rest of the offseason. Baseball's offseason is a long, slow burn, and the winter meetings are in December. And then you got spring training, which starts in February. And I think you're absolutely right that, yeah, once everybody gets over the heartbreak and the disappointment, they will, I think rightly, understand, especially after whatever additions are made, and maybe it's a re-signing of Bo Bichette, that this team, it's not the end of something, it's the start of something. And that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hasn't really even entered what should be his physical prime, and that Trey Savage hasn't even pitched an entire regular season in the major leagues of baseball. And you get to watch those guys. Well, you Savage every 5th day, but Vladimir Guerrero Jr. every single day in 2026. Yeah, I think this fan base is going to be over the moon to start the season next year.
You know, Ben, I got to thank you. You've actually helped me sort of get through this a little bit, like the disappointment of it all, and the way the feelings that we all expected that, you know, what Toronto was going to finally pull through with one of its teams, but a Game 7 loss. We've known so many of them, especially with those Maple Leafs. And as we focus the Maple Leafs and their up and downness already, but Ben, it's been great catching up with you, talking Blue Jays. I know at the heart, at the core, and I know you talk about a lot of sports at Sportsnet, but and at the Fan 590. But I know baseball's really special to you. Where can people find you and listen to you? I know you got a lot going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Fan Morning Show is Monday to Friday, 6 till 9 a.m. on Sportsnet 590 The Fan, so 590 on your AM dial. Also podcasted wherever you get your podcast, Fan Morning Show. You can follow me on X at Sportsnet Ben, and on Instagram at BNS01. And yeah, I thank you for giving me an opportunity to go through some therapy as well, Bubba, because I think we all need it. We need to get some stuff off our chests after Saturday. It was helpful for me too.
Thanks for joining us, partner. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. That's your Sportsline podcast for the day. And as you've just seen and heard, we love talking about the highs and sometimes the low of sports. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote the Sportsline podcast, do want to hear from you. Please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. And if you have something to say, we always appreciate your comments. For the outstanding people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, thank you so very much. And we'll see you very soon.